A few months ago I made this concrete countertop, but I never finished the frame that it sits on. So in this video I'm going to show you a very cost-effective but good-looking way of cladding this type of framing using readily available materials. My name's Robin, and if I can, you can. This is treated pine decking. It's a softwood and it's relatively cheap. I've used it before in the front yard for a small deck and it's lasted okay. It is a softwood, so it's never going to last as long as a hardwood, but if you're happy to do a little bit more maintenance on it and you take into account the cost difference, it's actually pretty good. I've used it in the past for this type of project. You can see behind me the screen that I've got between me and the neighbor's yard. It looks great when you use it as palings. With that in mind, I'm going to be keeping it the same color scheme as you see behind me on those timbers. So the next step is to give it a couple of coats of a water-based decking stain. This is a water-based decking stain, and I've grown really fond of using this for a few reasons. This isn't a sponsor of the video, I just really like this brand. And one of the best things about it is that it dries really quickly. So I can batch out all 14 of these boards probably within a few hours. The other thing is that it does create a bit of a film, which is great for wear and tear, especially here in Australia. These sort of softwoods are abused by the rain and the sun, so they need as much protection as they can get. One thing about it though is you have to be very careful with the way you apply it. It's not like an oil where you can throw it on and wipe it off after 15 minutes and it looks great. This starts drying and soaking into the timber almost immediately as it touches it. So that means you have to make sure that you start on one end of the timber and work your way to the other. The other thing is I'm going to try applying this with a roller. Now normally you would use a brush, and I've only ever used brushes in the past, but I have got a little bit of streaking at times. So I want to see if this improves the look a little bit. And the roller, definitely a success.
The original plan was to use timber slats the whole way around the frame, but I decided instead to use cement sheet on the sides. I had some left over, and sometimes we have rain coming under the pergola, so using a solid water-resistant material makes more sense. I got my angle grinder with a diamond blade and cut 2 pieces of cement sheet. I find it easiest to cut these sheets on the lawn. That way you won't damage anything underneath the cut, and a lot of the dust gets trapped in the grass. Then I sanded the edges smooth.
Now while the easiest way for me to attach this cement sheet to the frame would be to just screw it on, I can't do this for a couple of reasons. There's a tap underneath the frame here, and I'm not entirely sure what the plumbing code is, but I'm almost sure that you can't block off a plumbing fixture permanently. The other reason as well is that this is the only tap for the backyard, so it makes sense to make it accessible at any time. So the way I'm going to get around this is this cement sheet that sits against the frame is going to be removable, so at any time you can just pull the panel off and you can access the tap.
I cut a few 2x4s and started by attaching one of them to the inside of the cabinet. Then I could attach another 2 to that piece, and these are what the cement sheet would screw into. The horizontal timber would hold the 2 verticals in place while I attached the sheet.
Now that I've got the cement sheet clamped up to the timber, I can screw it into the timber behind it that's going to be used to line it up in this hole. Now to screw cement sheet into timber, one of the best things I find are these self-drilling screws, because they've got a slight bit of a cutout in the tip of the screw, and that's just enough to cut through the cement without having to drill a hole. Because a normal screw, the problem with it is it's going to take a long time to get through the cement, but also it tends to blow the cement out because it's not cutting any material away. These screws work fantastic for this.
I countersunk all the holes and added the screws. Then I could remove the screws in the jig and pull the whole panel out. Well, only just.
So I think what's going wrong is these timbers need to be sanded down just a hair so that they slide in a little bit easier, because at the moment it's just a little bit too tight.
I lined up the cabinet handle in the center of the panel and added another 2x4 behind it to screw through. This panel ended up being a lot heavier than I'd expected, so it needed the extra backing to spread the load. Again, I used a self-drilling screw to drill a hole into the cement sheet. This way I can use a cheap screw to make the initial hole instead of an expensive drill bit. After that, I can come back with said drill bit and open up the hole. keep the panel in place, I used a magnetic cabinet latch and started by attaching the metal piece to the panel. Then I put the panel in place and screwed in the magnet. After that, I moved on to the slats.
The easiest way for me to find out the spacing between each slat is to start by putting one slat at the top, one slat at the bottom, and then use the distance between the two of those to work out the spacings. The only issue that could have occurred is this cutout here by the barbecue, but I got lucky in that the spacing is going to work out fine, so that only a small piece needs to come off a slat to accommodate that. Now, what I'm looking for here is not perfect accuracy, because I know that this top is most likely not perfectly level when you butt this timber up to the bottom of it. But what I do need to make sure is that it's close enough so that between this timber and this timber, if there is any differences, that I can slowly adjust for that on the way down and make really small adjustments so your eye won't pick up that the level is slightly changing as they move down. Alright, so I've got the top and the bottom slat on, and they're about 1 millimeter or 2 difference from that side and that side, but the overall distance between the two of them is around 638 millimeters. So that means I can get 6 slats in, and that will leave me with 98 millimeters after that. Divide that by 7, that's the 7 gaps in between those slats, and I get 14 millimeters, so it's a 14 millimeter gap between each slat. Now, the reason I could get away with it doing this way around, putting these two on and then working from there, was I didn't have a specific goal for the gap. All I knew is I wanted it to be around the 20 millimeter mark, and then no less than 5, because the timber's got to shrink and expand. You need to allow for that. So 14 millimeters is perfect. Now I can go about just attaching the rest of the slats with that space in mind. Now, using a tape measure to measure the gap between each slat is a terrible idea in this case. Because we want it millimeter perfect, depending where you look at the tape measure, you're going to come up with a slightly different result, and you could notice that. So a much better way of doing it is to take an old piece of timber, cut it to the size that you want, in this case 14 millimeters, and then every time you put a slat on, you stick that in, and then you know that the gap between each slat is going to be the same all the way down.
Then I got to work measuring and cutting each slat, pre-drilling and countersinking, then screwing it in using the spacers.
So we're at the halfway mark now. I've measured this end and that end, both are 327 millimeters, which is great. And I end up with 3 timbers with 57 millimeters worth of gaps. So if I divide that by 4 for the 4 gaps, I come up with 14.25 millimeters. So that does mean that we've got a little bit thinner in these gaps, but only by a fraction. So all it means is now, when I use the spacer for the next one, instead of forcing this next slat hard up against it, I'll make this a bit of a loose fit, and then that'll start to pick up the slack. This nook is where the gas bottle lives for the barbecue, so this panel needs to be able to come off. And this one I'm going to make out of slats, so once the panel's on, you're just going to see from one end to the other timber slats running all the way along. Now, in order for me to find where each line of these slats is going to end up across this nook and onto this timber, the easiest way for me to do this is to take a string line, put a screw on the other end, run the string line over the top of one of the slats, bring it through, and then as soon as I see the string line touch slats, then I can tell that this line here is where this slat should end up on this end, and that'll mean that I have a straight line running all the way across. I can't just rely on levels here because I'm not entirely sure of each one's level. This makes sure that to the eye, it's going to look straight. I'm busy looking into the regulations to find out how close you're allowed to have timber to the barbecue. I've seen a lot of pictures online where they do this, but here in Australia, the code might be different. But either way, I need this board because this is the starting point for the rest of the slat. So either way, if I do remove this or if I keep it, it's not a problem, but I do need this for today so I know where to start the rest of the slats going down.
This removable panel was made in the same way as the other one, but this time I added some paper shims before clamping the vertical pieces so they would slide in and out without needing to be sanded. Once this was finished, I added the cement sheet panel on the other side.
The original idea was to always trim out the edge of the cement sheet with some of this pine molding. But looking at it now, I don't actually think it requires it. It's not going to make that much of an impact. And at the end of the day, I'm trying to sell this house, so time is of the essence, so to speak. So I really want to try and finish this up as quick as possible. And the net gain by adding some of this trim is just not going to be worth it.
So all there was left was to paint up the cement sheet, put the panel back in place,
and the outdoor kitchen is done. There's still a few things here and there that I need to fix up before moving on, but for the most part, I'm incredibly happy with how this one turned out. This is just another addition to the backyard renovation, which I started about 6 months ago. And although I plan on selling this house in the near future, I'm hoping to have a few parties out here to at least make the most of the space. One of the other things I need to do is make a small notch in this timber to allow the pipe from the gas bottle to run up into the barbecue. And of course, all that junk has to go at some stage. But besides that, I'm calling this one a success. Now, all the tools and camera gear that I used to film this project will be in the description down below. I've started using Amazon affiliate links, so if you do choose to purchase something from Amazon through one of those links, the channel does get a kickback. It's no cost on your part, but it is a way of supporting the channel. And with that, my name's Robin, and if I can, you can. Thanks so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please go ahead and click that thumbs up, and if you haven't already, I would love for you to subscribe. Thanks again, and I'll talk to you guys soon.